Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, show number 78 for the 16th of April. Richard Saunders here with you once again. Sex. Now that I've got your attention, coming up on the show, Kylie Sturgis interviews sex researcher Dr. Petra Boynton from the UK about sex. And that'll be followed by a special Dr. Rachie Reports updating us all on the current situation and the good news with Singh, also in the UK. And to round off the show, we have the Think Tank with Dr. Rachie again, Joe Benhamu and myself. Those people in the Wollongong area, why not join Dr. Chrissy Wilson, Dr. Rachael Dunlop and myself as we give a talk at Skeptics in the Breeze. Now the website is meetup.com/Wollongong-skeptics, or if you just Google Skeptics in the Breeze. We're speaking this Sunday afternoon on the 18th of April, and that's kicking off around 2 o'clock. Check it out and come and say hello and enjoy 3 talks on Sunday afternoon. So sit back, grab that vodka martini, shaken not stirred, and enjoy this episode of The Skeptic Zone.
I'm Kylie Sturgis, and I'm talking to Dr. Petra Boynton. Dr. Petra Boynton is a lecturer in international health services research at a London university where she teaches doctors, nurses, and other health professionals at a postgraduate level. She regularly presents at conferences in the UK and internationally, and completes research and training within the area of sex and relationships health. She has presented earlier this year at the Westminster Skeptics on sex and the media. To begin this interview, I simply asked Dr. Petra, what is sexology?
Well, most people, if you ask them what they think sexology is, usually don't have any idea. Yeah. They don't know what the term means. It's not familiar to them. But I think for anyone who doesn't know what a sexologist is, or even a sex researcher, it's the study of sex, but it could include a whole variety of areas. So it could be through, say, sociology or psychology, medicine. It could be through history or anthropology. It can be very biomedical in nature. It can be very much in the sort of zoology, biology areas. Sometimes I've even been told they've been doing physics and sex, and I'm not quite sure what that involves.
Wow.
But it's most disciplines. But most disciplines that study sex would come under a sort of an umbrella of sexology.
You're very active on your drpetra.co.uk website and on Twitter with a number of links to media releases on sex and sexuality, like Facebook will give you syphilis story, for example. How do you deal with that sort of misinformation? And it seems to be never ending. Is it really that bad?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that when you start looking at it, you find more awful things. So I started off blogging to try and I suppose have a platform to share more accurate information and to challenge initially stuff that I'd been misquoted on, but it quickly spread to actually not really being a lot to do with what I've been misquoted on, but a lot more about poor media coverage generally. And I mean, I could spend pretty much all my time criticising because there's lots of stuff that's not very good. But I think I've tried to limit myself to things that are really awful. So the Facebook Give You Syphilis story was just such a bad piece of reporting, but also bad practice from people involved in healthcare in the UK. They claimed that Facebook, well, they didn't say Facebook, they said social networking sites gave you syphilis, or were related to it. But it's things like that where I see it going kind of global that I usually will try and write something because a lot of stuff is very localized. It's not very good, but, you know, maybe hardly anyone sees it. And my worry is if sometimes I write about it and it gets a lot of attention, I've kind of made it worse and given it more credit than it needs. So most of the stuff I do tends to focus around really large-scale pieces of research or things that have become very popular in the media internationally.
Recently you wrote on your blog about the need for reliable UK sex education and the difficulties of making it compulsory in schools.
People think we've had sex education in schools for a very long time. And in fact, a lot of faith-based groups point to our rising rates of sexually transmitted infections and pregnancy in young people, and they say that's happened because of sex education, that, you teach it and they all rush out and try and have sex.
Yeah.
In truth, we actually haven't got very good sex education in the UK, in that in a lot of places it doesn't happen at all, or it does, but it's only taught within the curriculum, which is basic biology, so reproduction. Some schools are fabulous and they bring in outside speakers. They have great school nurses who are specifically trained to talk about sex. Other schools bring in people who talk about abstinence. Some schools don't bring in anybody at all. And so we have a real muddle in the UK of inconsistent teaching. It's unreliably taught. And it's not to say that those doing the teaching are well-meaning or aren't trying. I think, there's a danger of suggesting that, and that's not what I'm saying. But if you look at this growing body of research from young people, studies on young people showing time and time again, them saying, look, okay, yeah, teaching us about condoms and teaching us about contraception and STIs and all the rest of it is useful. But what about feelings and emotions and managing a relationship and knowing when someone fancies you and when to say yes and when to say no and all of the things that we all want to know as adults and as young people? There was clearly a need to do something. In fairness, our Department of Families, Children and Skills, they basically, our Families and Kids Department really felt that something needed to be done. There was a big youth parliament study that said thousands of kids wanted it and felt it was their right. And so a couple of years ago, they said, okay, we are going to make this compulsory. And there was a huge outcry in the press about how very young children as young as 5 were going to be made to watch, I don't know what they were going to be made to do, but there was a whole sort of backlash in the right-wing press about sort of corruption of children, with even the allegations that anyone who wanted to teach sex education somehow had an unhealthy interest in children, which is obviously a very, very damaging allegation to have raised. But that kind of blew over, and there was a consultation, and lots of people said they didn't want it, but most people did, and most parents did. We then saw, not too long ago, that they did a bit of a U-turn where they said, OK, we're going to let faith groups decide what can be taught. Now, this is quite interesting because what they also said was that we will let parents opt their children out of sex education until the child is 15. So that would mean that you'd have at least 1 year of compulsory sex education. Right. But up until that time, your parents could remove you. Obviously, that's just ridiculous because you need to have the education much younger. If you're having it at 15, and you're at risk from a teenage pregnancy, you'll probably be a mum by then. It's just daft. So there was that backtrack, and then there was this faith backtrack where they said, okay, they're going to still have to teach the standard curriculum, this new curriculum, but they can say what they want about their faith on top of it. So it might be in a Catholic school, they would teach everything about termination, but they would then say it was wrong. Or in a school where maybe many of the children were Muslim, they might say, well, there is differences in sexuality, but being gay is wrong. And then just the other week, they basically were trying to get this new sex education statutory into schools, and the Conservatives opposed and wouldn't support it. And basically, because they were trying to get other things on the new Children and Families Bill through, they dropped it. So what that means in a very long-winded reply is that having had all this consultation and support and sort of growth and parents saying, yes, we need this help because most of us didn't get good sex education, so, please help us. What we ended up with now is that we'll be still in the same position, that some schools will be doing great, but a lot of schools won't. And it's really going to be a kind of a lottery to what you get. But this is bearing in mind, people living in a very different climate now, that it's not that, young people 20, 30, 50, 60 years ago weren't interested in dating and relationships and having sex. But nowadays there are very different expectations upon young people and pressures that we would really need sex education to help explain. And it is really unclear now what is going to happen. We really don't know, and that's a worry.
One of the things that keeps coming up again and again is this tale about raunch culture and how the sexualization of young women is a huge concern. You even linked on Twitter to a Salon.com article about how films like Juno didn't seem to be really encouraging teen pregnancy. So is this sexualisation as big a concern as the media seems to make it?
The majority of the reports that have been done on sexualisation, I think, are not particularly helpful because they all work from the premise of saying, well, there's this thing called sexualisation and we don't quite know what it is, but we're going to act as though we do know what it is and now talk about how awful it is. And we'll bring in whatever evidence we can find, to support our cause and say it's terrible. Certainly some things have undoubtedly changed. New technologies have made things different. The internet has made things different. Mobile phones have made things different. I mean, I think, for a lot of us when we were at school, we might have picked on a girl who was perceived to be sexual. We might have called her nasty names. We may have tormented her on the way home from school, but we wouldn't have been able to go home and then go on to, the internet and call her names or go on Facebook and start being mean or texting or all it. So it's. I don't believe that these technologies have somehow made this suddenly start, but they do enable things that are problematic to go on. They also enable things that are very good to happen. I mean, they offer opportunities for young people to learn a lot and to share and connect. But there is the downside, and I think the difficulty we've got is having a calm and reasoned discussion about it, because it gets caught up with the media and with politicians, and it's very easy to make these blanket statements. The thing that I think is worrying about a lot of the sexualisation debates is that it becomes very reductionist. It's this idea that young people have no sense of awareness or agency, that if they happen to see Juno, then they'll go and get pregnant, or if they watch a rap video, the next minute they'll be just wearing hot pants and dancing in the high street, or if they are in any way exposed to sort of sexual messages, they'll go off and try them. And I think a lot of the research with young people shows that they're quite savvy. They don't all want to do this. They can interpret it. They may choose to do it, and often quite knowingly. But they may also decide that they don't like it particularly, or it doesn't appeal to them, or they can take it or leave it and certainly give it some sensible thought.
It seems sometimes that people have this notion in their mind that young women are just passive, that they're just sort of taking these things on, that they're not being encouraged to question. Is that really as true as it seems to be? I
mean, it's so difficult, isn't it? I think that certainly there are some women who've had negative experiences, but I think the general approach to sort of suggesting that young women are all victims and young men are all sort of aggressors, A assumes everyone's heterosexual, which of course they aren't, and B assumes that all young people are internet savvy and connected, which a lot of them aren't, and that they're all somehow or other part of this. I mean, a lot of youth culture is about doing things that are baffling and offensive to adults. I mean, that's the point. You don't want to be doing what your parents agree with, and that and I think also part of being a parent from the other side is that you see things very differently as an adult, and so a lot of this is about us being afraid for our children, and we should worry about young people. But it then, the thing that bothers me about a lot of these sort of discussions in the media, and there's been a few books written recently about this so-called raunch culture and how somehow it's the demise of feminism that's led to it, and it problematizes girls rather than boys. And what it ends up with eventually is still a sort of narrative about girls behaving themselves. So it kind of talks about how awful it is that girls are portrayed in a sexual way, and yet critiques and attacks those girls who do it, or makes up they're victims, or that they're somehow deluded, or they don't know their own minds, or that they can't possibly have any agency or choice, that this is being sort of, this sexualization is sort of dumped upon them, as though they don't think about it. And I think what we're realising from more sensitive work with young people is that, yes, they actually do think about this. Young men have a lot to say, and there is some sensitive work to be done with young men. I mean, the difficulty, I think, with young men is that within the sexualisation debate, they tend to be given questions that will only make them look dreadful. So you see a lot of studies where they say, have you looked at pornography? And they say, yes, they have. And then they say, what do you think about women? And they get them to say, how negatively they view women. But I think if you don't give young boys those cues and just get them to talk about relationships generally, yes, they can be incredibly judgmental about women, but you can challenge that. Yeah. And it doesn't mean to say that that's how they actually behave all the time. I mean, I think certainly a lot of issues around sexism is an issue and we need to challenge it. But for me, I think the point when we're only talking about sexualisation and victims and oppressors is we miss this is actually a lot more about commercialisation and aspirational messages that we're getting all the time about how you should act and live and have great sex and all of the rest of it. And it seems strange that the media on the one hand says how awful sexualisation is and yet is saying, 2 pages later, how to please your partner or here's to buy these great lingerie that will boost your sex life or, all these sort of messages constantly of sex is something to achieve and to perfect and to perform. There's nothing about pleasure or teasing or adventure or exploration or just not doing it. That's not an option. And so I think we look to pornography and we look to all sorts of things like, Playboy bunny T-shirts and makeup for young children and get upset about that. And we miss these very commercialised messages young people are getting all the time, really.
Many people might be wondering, why am I talking to you on a Skeptic show? But there has been a recent development that seems to be very much looking at paranormal and pseudoscientific beliefs in regards to clitoraid in Africa and the pro-alien group called the Raelian movement. How on earth could clitorises, Africa, and the idea that we're all alien be joined together?
Well, I mean, yes, it does sound rather baffling, but I will hopefully explain it
because
before I am taken away.
And I still can't figure it out. It's like, where did these people come from?
It is well, I think we come from other planets is the answer, but I don't know. I mean, it's all very, very peculiar. I mean, basically, some people may have actually seen this in that what actually happened a few weeks ago was that we a lot of people had invitations on Twitter to adopt a clitoris. And a lot of people thought, oh, actually, I like the sound of that, pleasure, helping women regain their bodies and reconstructive surgery, I'll sign up.
Yeah, I'll have two, in fact. Why not? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. People thought it was a good idea and very well-meaning and all the rest of it. And I went and had a look at the website, and the first thing that I thought was a bit peculiar about it was that it said it was run by these Raelian organisation, which I have to say I didn't really know much about. They weren't someone I was familiar with. So I did a bit of digging and thought, actually, they do have some slightly peculiar beliefs around sort of cloning and intelligent design and sort of, I don't know, it just made me feel slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, I'll still keep an open mind because a lot of faith groups do work in all over the world and do a good job at it. And so I didn't want to say, this is awful straight away, but I just had these alarm bells ringing that this was just not quite right. So I emailed the organisation and said, what are you actually doing? Because it wasn't really clear from their website and their brochures. It said that they were doing reconstructive surgery. So basically after a woman's had a clitoris removed, you can do some repair that actually helps her to sort of reattach nerve endings so she can regain the feeling and experience a clitoral orgasm. But we don't know how often or how effective it is. And I couldn't really work out from Clitoraid, where were they involved and did people have to join their organisation to have the surgery? Were they offering other faith, their sort of faith-based views alongside the surgery? How were they working in communities, and particularly how collaborative was it? Were they just turning up and telling people what they had to do, or were they engaging? Because a lot of my work's in international health, and we're very mindful that there's a long history of well-meaning but often very oppressive people who have a great idea that worked in Manhattan or in Boston or in London, and so they think, well, this will work in Botswana, so here we are. And the local community may be too polite or too oppressed or just need something and so won't say no. I kind of was a bit bothered about their approaches. They didn't really reply to me. I didn't get anything from them. A few colleagues did, and they weren't very clear on what it was they were actually doing. And they've not measured. I mean, this is a hospital doing reconstructive surgery, but they can't tell you how many surgeries they've carried out or whether they were successful or not, which is worrying.
Yeah.
They said they're going to publish something, but they haven't got any data. And, weirdly, they're signing off their emails from their hospital with this join another group of theirs, which is to give women the right to go topless, which, fair enough if you want to go topless, but it seems slightly flippant alongside a campaign against female genital mutilation. It's all a bit peculiar. So there's been a whole issue around sort of Clitoraid and who they are and how much money they've got. And I had an email from somebody who works in the porn industry who'd said, I actually saw these guys coming to a conference, an adult entertainment conference back in 2007, and they were collecting then for this hospital, and people were stuffing, lots of money into their collection boxes because they play on what I think some people have called orgasm guilt. I'm here having this sexy time, therefore I'm going to help these other people have a sexy time, and yet this hospital is, the calls to adopt a clitoris are still to build this hospital. And I appreciate hospitals cost money, but it just seems this has been going on for a long while and nobody can really see what they're doing or where they've got with this program. And the other thing, apart from this sort of, I suppose, imposition of a program on a community, which may or may not be welcome, is there doesn't seem to be any local checking. They claim that nobody else offers this service in Burkina Faso where they're offering it. And yet actually where people have investigated it, there's plenty of people in Burkina Faso offering free reconstructive surgery. They don't have a lot of money, but why is Clitoraid and the Raelians building their own hospital when existing hospitals are doing this and just need a bit more cash to pay for it? So there's that element of sort of imposing not only your idea that you're going to build a hospital, but not liaising with services that are already doing what needs to be done. So, I mean, I think the thing that has made a lot of people feel uncomfortable as well is not only that these services already exist. So it's not like, Clitoraid are right when they say, nobody else is doing this, but they don't seem to have consulted with anybody else offering this service, which you would normally do in an international context. But more than that, I think there's this additional problem of the call to adopt a woman's clitoris, which, I think a lot of people have found distasteful because it's saying, go and adopt an African woman's clitoris. And you're wondering, would it work if we said, why don't we adopt a French man's testicle or an Icelandic woman's nipple or something? I mean, does it carry with particular connotations of sort of ownership and sort of appropriation that would understandably cause offence? And even though I think a lot of people have been incredibly well-meaning in their support of this campaign, it's not been something that they've thought about. And I think that it's been actually quite a telling case study for people involved in sex education and in science, because I've seen a lot of scientists talk about, we must do something about this, and a lot of people involved in sex education and research saying, come on, support this venture, support Clitoraid and adopt a clitoris. And I think it's because, female genital mutilation and cutting is so upsetting and such an awful thing that people don't want to question it. And because giving women pleasure is such a powerful thing, nobody wants to be the one that's the sort of spoils the party. And so the difficulty, I think, in challenging this is that the people who would normally be very critical, people who'd normally be very sceptical, have not applied their sceptical lens on this occasion, because I think the overall area is something that is so problematic. They want to be seen to do something and not question it. It's something, in fact, they wouldn't even question it because they think, well, this is obviously a good cause. And in fact, I've had some people say, look, okay, it's run by the Raelians and it is a cult and it is, we don't really know much about it, and it has got this awful Dr. Clitoris thing that goes with it. But hey, if it's helping women, we shouldn't really say anything about it. Yeah. Or some people said, that because I've questioned it, I'm a sort of an anti-sex feminist who is prudish and I want to deny African women pleasure. So by that token, I'm also prudish and racist. Or that because I've challenged female genital mutilation, or I've got involved in debates around male and female circumcision, which has sort of come with this, that there's been a sort of a wider discussion about, that this is, you're somehow condoning female genital mutilation and cutting by questioning this issue. And that, I think, is quite a sort of a good but upsetting case study for people who are sceptical, to think about. We're often good on certain issues, immunisation, vaccinations, homeopathy, and various other things, to quickly think, okay, I'm going to question this, I'm going to go and really research it. But on this issue, a lot of people have been like, well, I don't think I'm going to question it because I don't want to be seen to be, condoning a practice I don't agree with, or it's just too uncomfortable, or maybe just I don't think I need to question it because I don't agree with female genital mutilation, and therefore I will do anything to support, organisations.
Very little to show evidence of where the money's going, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, I approach this as I tend to approach most things, which is, okay, I'd like this to be a really good venture. I bear it no ill will. I would like it to be a good venture. But the more I've looked into it, I can't work out what they're doing. I can't work out why they're doing sort of treatment where it's already on offer. I don't understand why, there is no real clear evidence of what they've spent this money on or how much they've got so far since at least 2007, but possibly longer as far as we know. And again, if you are providing sort of hospital care and you can't talk about how many people you've seen or what's happened, their response is to say what evidence they count is women telling them they've had an orgasm for the first time. Which is wonderful, but it's also quite naive because it doesn't tell you about women for whom it may not have worked. And in a culture, if you're in a culture where women's clitorises are viewed as so threatening they have to be cut away, there is a whole question of if you start restoring them but you don't do any wider community working and education and practice, that she may be shunned or ostracised or recut or whatever. So there's that whole problem there around, we certainly know that reconstructive surgery can work, but the evidence suggests that the surgery is really the first bit of the puzzle. It only works if you then do wider community work and building and particularly around gender inequalities and interpersonal relationships, and involve women and men in what you do. And I haven't got any evidence that they've done that either. And it's unfortunate because it's got, sort of commercial backing from a sex store, and it's all kind of resulting now in sort of kind of fairly unpleasant discussions really about, people getting involved. And I think, the best thing we could think about when anything like this comes along is to try and be, critical and it doesn't mean to say you're going to not support something, but you're just going to ask a few questions first. Yeah. And we do need to sort of talk about that publicly, even if it's uncomfortable. And I think, what's happened here is a lot of people are running headfirst wanting to support it and have done so very publicly. And as a result, we've had to have questions and conversations in public that perhaps would have been better in private. Yeah. That probably could have had, if people had said, I think I might support this organisation, what do you reckon? Collaboratively working again, we could have probably found out that they probably weren't the right people to support. But it's interesting that people are still saying, well, okay, I might not donate, but I still think it's a good idea. But I don't know that it's a good idea. I mean, I certainly reconstructive surgery is not a bad idea if it's done appropriately and with community involvement and a proper support. And certainly challenging female genital mutilation is definitely a good cause. But this particular organisation and their approach, I don't know, what it's doing. I mean, they certainly seem to have done some surgery, so I don't think it's, a total scam. But I don't know quite what is going on. And I think the interesting thing about the sponsorship angle, because they've had some sponsorship coming in from sort of sex stores and the like, is that very often people working in sex education and research like me, we want to do some good, we want to help people, but it's often quite hard. Some charities won't accept your money because you're involved in sex or areas of sex that they disapprove of. Particularly around sexual pleasure. I took a thing a few years ago where I was involved with some friends of mine who were involved in dancing, erotic dancing and stripping, and they made a charity calendar, and they found it very hard to find charities who would accept their money. They raised money, but people didn't want their money, or rather they didn't want to be associated with this organisation. It could play on that in a sense, in that they'll take cash because other people won't. And that's an issue I think we need to think about. And also, again, to sort of challenge this notion that just because you've questioned this organisation doesn't mean to say that you think that African women aren't entitled to pleasure. I mean, that is a nonsense.
I guess it's also one of those sticky things about feminism altogether. Are you being anti-feminist or are you being pro-feminist because you care enough to question?
Absolutely, and I think for me, it's years ago I heard about female genital mutilation and cutting in the early 90s actually, and it was after Alice Walker wrote a book, Possessing the Secret of Joy, which talked about it, and I'd never heard of it until that time, and I got very interested in it, and I started to read up on it and make connections with people working on the issue in the UK. And at the time I was a psychology lecturer working with undergraduates, and I wanted it on my we had a health course, and I put it into the health psychology course, and I ended up with all kinds of problems with, people saying, well, why are you teaching this? Because this is just about African women. What's it got to do with us? And we're never going to meet anybody who's involved in this. And, it's you should just let cultures get on with it. You're being racist for saying they shouldn't do it. And all sorts of backlash that sort of happened then. And it's one of those areas that I think, in this situation, you've got the sort of the female genital mutilation issue, which always brings up debate, around culture and race and other areas, and religion as well. And then because it's linked to sort of feminism and sex-positive feminism, there's obviously the argument around feminist involvement there. But I suppose an added layer is also the sort of the international development level of whether you should or shouldn't get involved. So of all of the things to really kind of get into a sticky and an unpleasant debate, this would probably have the hallmarks of all the things that you're going to get, got at from all sides for saying. And I think that's why a lot of people have said, I just don't want to talk about this publicly, because it means, even if I can argue it from an international development and health argument, I'm still going to get got at from feminists, or I'm still going to be got at from sex educators, or you kind of can't win. And that's, I think, for me, one of the interesting things about the sort of the journey of skepticism, in a sense, is that how do you find ways to try and raise these issues firmly but gently, that doesn't sort of have to become a personal attack on people, even though it might feel like that, but that still makes us think, let's question it. Because one of the things I really value from my people I know who are critical thinkers and people who are very reflective is that they make me think twice about what I do, and that really helps me make decisions, and it means that if I've made the incorrect decision, or perhaps I could have done something better, I can hopefully find a way to express that or set it right. And I think when you get into something like this, where it's got lots of grey areas, in a sense, and lots of areas where people might feel they're not sure. So on the one hand, yes, they want to be a sex-positive person and support pleasure, but on the other hand, they don't agree with female genital cutting. And on the other hand, they're not sure about the whole cult thing and the alien movement, but yet they want to encourage development in Africa. You're kind of pulled the whole time. And I think that we very often feel more comfortable, I think, as skeptics sometimes with more black and white debates, that we can say, well, this is wrong or this is right, or we can get into quite concrete thinking and sort of arguments that are quite static, whereas a lot of this stuff is fluid, it's very, very complex, and it's not comfortable to talk about, and because it makes people very upset and angry, it then tends to lead to, I talked about it a bit, I tried to talk about it a bit on the Bad Science forums, because I didn't know much about the Raelians. I knew a lot about female genital cutting, but I didn't know much about the Raelians, and I wondered if anybody might know something there, and I asked, and some people were very helpful. In fact, a lot of people have been very helpful on this venture, but there was the inevitable backlash of, accusations of racism and things like that you kind of think, well, this now makes it very difficult to have a sensible conversation, because you're now firefighting those accusations, and that's, I think, the problem in that we really need with these issues is to focus on the issues, and in a sense evidence is our friend here, because it lets us think about it. I wouldn't say dispassionately, because certainly I'm not, but at least with a kind of I suppose a buffer there that you can say, well, look, and certainly the way I've approached writing about Clitoraid is not to start sort of really a slanging match with anyone who supported them. It's more to say, look, here's your way out. Look, this is what I found out about this organisation, and it makes me question what's happening, and I'm not sure about how it's been employed in this community, and I really don't know how it's been sort of done, and it seems to be stepping on a lot of toes. So I think we should think about that, and part of being, I suppose a critical thinker is that you can say, hang on, I did this, I supported this, but I actually think I've now changed my mind, and here's why. And I think people, and people respect you for that. I think people really do respect you for that. But I've certainly had a few people email me who work more in the sex education side of things, who said, look, I publicly supported this venture, and I kind of now feel I can't say I don't support it anymore, because people will think I'm a hypocrite. And there's a big issue for a lot of people who talk about and blog about and research and do therapy in sex, that you're under such a lot of criticism at the best of times that you're not a proper scientist if you research sex, and you're not a proper blogger if you write about sex, and you're not a proper therapist if you do sex therapy, that people don't want to give any more ammunition that they might have changed their mind, because it will be used against them. And I can see that being a big barrier for a lot of people, of just not knowing how to sort of find a way through it. I think we still have to say things even if they're uncomfortable, and reflect. I mean, I'm still reflecting on this now, and if it turns out someone can give me evidence to say that this Clitoraid thing is the best thing ever and has helped transform a community, then I'm going to have to say that. But nobody has been able to say that to me so far.
And if people want to check out your work and check out your Twitter stream, they can head to...
on Twitter it's at Dr. Petra, and which is just DRPETRA, and the website is www.drpetra.co.uk. So that's drpetra.co.uk, and it's the blog is just I think you just go straight to it, but if not, it's /blog. So have a look around, because hopefully they'll find some stuff in there that they kind of find interesting. And it sort of veers between, complaining about the media to sort of unpacking pieces of research to advice. And there is bits of advice in there as well. Great.
And it would be wonderful to see you more on the Skeptic scene too. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually had a very warm welcome, and I think it's been, I've been doing stuff sort of through science sort of communication for a long while, although I certainly have issues about, what that always means. And I don't know that I would call myself a scientist, but I think within sort of skepticism, it's interesting, actually, colleagues of mine who've been working in sort of trying to do research around people involved in prostitution, which is, again, a very controversial area, have found that they've had a lot of support from skeptics around helping them kind of challenge policy and practice and avoid the sort of more hysterical side of arguments about it, and just to do some straightforward talking that inevitably will be better in terms of helping people involved in sex work who want to exit it, but also supporting those who are currently involved who don't. And I think that's been a very helpful move.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Petra.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yay.
Upon completing this interview, more breaking news about Clitoraid has hit the internet. So head to www.drpetra.co.uk to find out more.
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
Hello listeners, I'm Dr. Rachie, and welcome to this very special roundup of recent events in the skeptical community. Hasn't it been a busy few weeks? Some people are saying that 2010 is going to be the year for science and skepticism. and it's certainly starting to look that way. So let me start off by saying Happy Chiropractic Awareness Week to everyone. Yes, it is Chiropractic Awareness Week, and it overlaps with World Homeopathy Awareness Week. How convenient! And what a great way to start the week. Yesterday, and after 2 years of a long and drawn-out battle, the British Chiropractic Association, or BCA, finally caved in and announced they were withdrawing their libel action against Dr. Simon Singh. Simon Singh's lawyers were advised after the BCA filed a notice of discontinuation in the High Court in London. Now, to recap, Singh was sued in April 2008 for a piece he wrote in The Guardian's comment pages where he suggested there was a lack of evidence for the claims some chiropractors made on treating certain childhood conditions, and this included colic and asthma. Now, the BCA alleged that Dr. Singh had effectively accused its leaders of knowingly supporting bogus treatments. After advising they were dropping the court case, in a statement they said, "Having carefully considered its position in the light of the judgment of the Court of Appeal on the 1st of April 2010, the BCA has decided to discontinue its libel action against Simon Singh. As previously made clear, the BCA brought the claim because it considered that Simon Singh had made a serious allegation against its reputation, namely, that the BCA promoted treatments that it knew to be bogus. The BCA now feels that the time is right for the matter to draw to a close." So as recently as April the 1st, 2010, Simon won the right to appeal the initial decision by Mr. Justice Eadie over the meaning of the word bogus. Lord Justice Judge, Lord Justice Neuberger and Lord Justice Sedley ruled unanimously that Singh had the right to appeal that his article was opinion or comment. They said, quote, "This litigation has almost certainly had a chilling effect on public debate, which might otherwise have assisted potential patients to make informed choices about the possible use of chiropractic." So before the case was dropped, Singh had stated that he would continue to defend his position, even though he expected the case would cost him in excess of £1 million. He has already spent more than £100,000 of his own money defending the case. Now, the action taken by the BCA has backfired to some extent and resulted in significant scrutiny of chiropractic treatment in the UK. And in particular, following complaints to the Advertising Standards Authority, 1 in 4 chiropractors in Britain are currently under investigation for allegedly making misleading claims in their advertisements. And in a related defensive move, another chiropractic body called the McTimoney Association of Chiropractors, or the MCA, deleted their website for fear of retribution and advised its members to do the same. In a leaked email, they told their members this: "Remove all the blue MCA patient information leaflets or any patient information leaflets of your own that state you treat whiplash, colic, or other childhood problems in your clinic or at any other site where they might be displayed with your contact details on them. Do not use them until further notice. The MCA are working on an interim replacement leaflet which will be sent to you shortly." Wow, pretty amazing stuff. And even here in Australia, we were not immune from complaints by chiropractors. In October 2009, Australian skeptics had a complaint lodged with the Healthcare Complaints Commission following the publication of Singh's original Guardian article on our website. It was republished across the world with the libelous statement removed on the 1-year anniversary of original publication. An Australian chiropractor, Joseph Arano, wrote a letter to Australian skeptics with a detailed but somewhat rambling rebuff of the article, and when he did not receive a response to his liking, he went to the HCCC. The complaint was subsequently dismissed. Now, of the case being dropped against him, Simon Singh had this to say: "The case is not quite over because we still have to argue over costs. Having backed down and dropped the case, I expect the BCA to pay my legal bills of approximately £200,000. I fully expect the BCA to argue that they should not pay all my costs, but I think this is the very least that they should do because this entire legal battle has been instigated by the BCA." He also told BBC News, "Other scientists, science writers, bloggers, investigative journalists, human rights activists all get threatened with these libel suits. And at the end of the day, the people who lose out are the general public because we don't get to find out the real truth because these libel suits just stop good journalism. So the decision by the BCA to withdraw the action, despite being, quote, advised there are strong grounds for appeal against the Court of Appeal, is a victory for journalists and science writers. Simon Singh said he was hugely relieved but expressed his annoyance that libel actions continued to be used to block what he viewed as legitimate scientific inquiry and debate. As of today, The Guardian has reposted Simon's original article and comments are open. So if you'd like to read it and leave your comments, head to www.guardian.co.uk/comment-is-free/April/19/controversies in science-health. You can Google it. I had trouble finding it. Sorry for the long URL. Now, even though Simon's case has now been dropped, libel reform is still desperately needed in the UK. So if you haven't yet signed the petition, please head to www.libelreform.org/sign. And you don't have to be a resident of the UK to sign this petition. And I also recommend, for up-to-date news and links to other media coverage, head over to Sense About Science, or if you're on Twitter, follow @JackofKent, who's been blogging this case from day one. So also, as World Homeopathy Awareness Week draws to a close, I've written an article called Homeopathy There's Nothing in It for the blog called thepunch.com.au. It's my first piece for them, so please click on over to increase my page views and leave a comment if you feel like it. If I get lots of hits and lots of comments, then they might just ask me back. And finally for today, on Thursday, April the 22nd, we're calling on all skeptical bloggers to post on You Only Like Me Because I'm Good in Blog Day. On this day, we're asking bloggers to write about dealing with blog post comments, trolls, how you maintain your site, and tips for those who'd like to try starting to write a skeptical blog. And also our own Kylie Sturgis on her Token Skeptic podcast will feature audio from last year's DragonCon blogging panel, which also features me. So head to www.shethought.com for more details. And actually, coming up in this week's Think Tank, I talk a little bit about some of the things that have been happening on my blog, skepticsbook.com, of late. So to all our listeners, happy World Homeopathy Awareness Week and happy Chiropractic Awareness Week. And until next time, this has been Dr. Rachie.
Join us now for Drinking Skeptically in the Think Tank.
I did it again. I made her laugh. I love it. Welcome to the Think Tank, and I'd like to welcome our favourite laughing, nomming girl, Jo Benhamu.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. And our other favourite laughing, nomming girl, Dr. Rachie.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well fed.
I reckon we could do a whole podcast of me and Dr. Rachie giggling, and we probably could actually.
Yeah. I think you probably could.
I don't think anyone would want to hear it, though.
No,
it wouldn't be that interesting.
Nice to be back here in our favourite club down the street where, Jo, you had a lovely meal.
I did. I nommed heartily.
You did. Actually, Rachie and I nommed earlier today, so we did
Yeah, I'm actually not hungry. I don't know why, but...
After that lunch?
But it wasn't a huge lunch, and I didn't have breakfast, so it should have... Anyway.
Oh, anyway.
It's all right.
I don't think our listeners want to know our eating habits.
But I nommed
really.
for the three of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jo.
In fact, we're probably not hungry because you didn't eat very much, therefore you're not hungry, which is sort of like the philosophy of homeopathy, isn't it? The less you eat, the less hungry you are.
How does that work?
Well, how does homeopathy work?
It doesn't.
I mention this because of World Homeopathy Awareness Week or Homeopathy World Awareness Week or whatever they're calling it.
They're calling it WA.
Wow, we were trying to come up with our own acronym or...
Acronym.
Acronym, not acronym.
Yeah, we just...
The Awareness Week, the power of two, which would be ho-ho.
Yes, I wish it was a barrel of laughs. It's interesting. 5 years ago, they had this World Homeopathy Awareness Week, and they had a little stand down here a little tents, or lots of tents set up down at Circular Quay here in Sydney, in the little park in Circular Quay. Mm-hmm. So I trotted down and was having a look around, and I noticed that they were advertising that they would appear, or the New South Wales Homeopathy Association would appear shortly thereafter at the Babies and Children's Expo, which I subsequently went to with our friend Peter Ratbag Bowditch, and we went to the stand of the homeopathy people, and they told us that yes, you can use homeopathy for immunisation. And we created a big stink about it at the time. And if people want to read that report, simply Google Homeopathy Exposed Again and Saunders, all that in Google, and you'll find my report from 5 years ago. And at the time we thought, wow, we've really busted them. Here we are, homeopathists advocating homeopathic vaccine. We've got them. You know, they've said it in public. Well, 5 years later, they're hardly making a secret of it, Dr. Rachie.
Well, remember months and months ago, Joe, you brought a paper from the London Journal of Medicine from 1851 by Dr. David McCormack, I believe, where he'd said in quite flowery language that it was bullshit. And then Peter Bowditch found a paper from, I think, 4 or 5 years before that saying it was nonsense. So on the 10th of April, earlier this week, was the birthday of Samuel Hahnemann.
Happy birthday to you.
Actually, where is Samuel Hahnemann?
He's sick today.
But yeah, in 200 years, people...
much has changed.
No, and the thing is, 5 years ago, The Lancet did that big study where they basically came out and said that, look, it's nonsense, there's nothing in it, it's just, it's fraudulent in some aspects, it's dangerous, it's... Yeah.
Because the thing is that, like so much of the alt-med dialogue, it's been turned into almost a postmodernist debate where everything is equal and everything is on the same sort of level. So
all ideas are valid.
All ideas are valid, exactly. So it almost seems like it doesn't matter what you put in front of them, it doesn't change what's being said and it doesn't change the outcome. They're still, that study from the Lancet, they're still waving that in the air and saying, that actually showed that there was a benefit to homeopathy. It didn't show that at all. But in terms of how they read the language, they'll wave it in the air as if it actually had a positive outcome for them, when it didn't.
Okay, but I think that raises a really interesting point, Joe, and this also leads on to a debate that Meryl Dorey wanted to conduct with somebody who is an immunologist in Australia this week. And that also turned into an argument about, well, both sides are equal, so let's have a big song and dance public debate, which we might talk about a little bit later. But why, I don't know, it puzzles me. And late at night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, when I'm not sleeping because I'm stressed or annoyed, usually annoyed actually, I wonder about that. I wonder, is it that these people have a compartmentalised part in their brain, or is it that? Is it B, because they've not had any scientific training? I suspect that's a large part of it. But
I think you're right. I think that's a very large part.
But that's not.
But that's not always the case, because there are a lot of people out there who have had a very good scientific training and who still believe this stuff.
Okay.
As we know, I suppose that we know as skeptics that even we aren't immune from having weird ideas about things. Yeah. But these people take it to an extreme where their ideas are so weird and they can hold those ideas despite having a good scientific training in some cases, unlike Meryl Dorey, who, as she says, has a brain.
But then, you're so right, because Karen Phelps is one of those people. And listeners who don't know, Karen Phelps, she's a very highly trained medical doctor in Australia. She was the head of the Australian Medical Association. She's a professor, an academic professor, and she's became very highly regarded in the public eye in Australia for her role in the AMA. And then she bought into this place called the U Clinic, which is a clinic for complementary medicine. And now she goes on to places like morning shows and talks about how autism can be modified or potentially cured by changing your diet and taking supplements. And that's the most dangerous thing, isn't it? Because
you've got a face of good medicine presenting bullshit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
really.
Yeah,
and that's actually, I think, one of the worst things is that, you know, when there used to be a time when this stuff existed separately from medicine. And now, as we're seeing in a lot of cancer centres, which are taking on which are taking on this integrated medicine approach, it's bringing it into the mainstream and making it. I mean, to the person out there who isn't familiar with alternative medicine, they're coming into this with the idea that, well, if my doctors are sharing rooms with a naturopath and an acupuncturist, well, then surely it must be valid. It gives it complete validity.
This reminds me absolutely of the pharmacy situation, where the one big room with a pharmacy with a pharmacist down the back and the little platform, they always stand up on a little platform dispensing their prescriptions, are sharing the same premises as magic and witchcraft.
And in fact, I just finished reading a really good book by Rose Shapiro, which I've mentioned to you before, Rachael. And if anyone out there hasn't read this, I recommend. You know, it's another book to add to the Skeptic's Bible, so to speak, or Skeptic's Encyclopedia. Called Suckers: How Alternative Medicine Makes Fools of Us All.
Well, I've heard about that. Yeah.
It's a really, really good book, and it's written. I think she is a journalist, and you know, as I said to Rachael, you know, I get to the point sometimes with a lot of this stuff where I think, wow, I think I've really sort of learnt. You know, I don't think I'm going to learn anything new about homeopathy, or I don't think I'm going to learn anything new about chiropractic and the stuff they get up to, and the way they sort of manipulate evidence and so on. And I found reading this book that I actually did learn a lot of new things. But one of the things that she comments on, which I think is really important, is this notion that, for example, in a cancer centre, that you can still provide an environment of nurturing and of warmth and healing, so to speak, without it being tainted by bullshit. You can still provide an environment for people with cancer that is relaxing and that is warm and welcoming and will, you know, promote healing without it being based on a dishonest idea of what that means.
Yeah, well, speaking of books, Jo, I received an email this week from a listener. Her name's Marie Longo, and she wrote me quite a long email, and I have to apologise to Marie because it took me a little bit longer than I should have to get back to her. And in fact, I think she emailed you in the meantime, Richard. I'm sorry, Marie, I'm very busy. But anyway, she did send a very interesting email, and this is also about a book, Jo, but it's not about a debunking book. The author, Jodi Picoult, I think that's how you pronounce it?
Yeah, I think so.
Picoult. She's a best-selling international author, and she's written her new bestseller, which is called House Rules. Now, Marie wrote to me because she was particularly concerned about some sections of this book, and that was, in fact, she's been very specific. She's actually cited the page numbers in the paperback. But specifically, it's because the story apparently centres around an 18-year-old boy who has Asperger's syndrome, and he's accused of murder. And towards the beginning of the book, the author discusses the connection between his Asperger's and his vaccinations.
Ah, yeah.
Oh, dear. Yeah, I mean, it's a novel, so it's fiction, but Marie writes that although both sides of the argument are presented, it isn't particularly balanced, and she said it left the reader with the impression that there must be a link between that. And I just want to quote from a section on page 498 where the character says, "He was perfectly happy, baby," Emma says. "For a moment she can't speak and she shakes her head. We gave him his shots, and within a week this very loving, interactive, verbal boy stopped being the child I knew. Suddenly he was lying on his side, spinning the wheels of his toy trucks instead of zooming them around the living room."
Oh, that sounds like something straight out of the Anti-Vaxxers Handbook.
That sounds like something straight out of Jenny McCarthy's books, doesn't it?
Yes, it does,
you know?
doesn't it? Yeah.
So she said, Marie says that the book is not primarily about autism or vaccines, but she said that for someone who is not educated and doesn't know, they would come away thinking that there must be a connection. And apparently this author, I've not read her stuff before, but apparently she's got a reputation for doing very precise and thorough research before she writes a novel.
I think she wrote that. I could be completely wrong here, but I think she wrote that book, My Sister's Keeper, which that movie was based on recently, which is about a young girl with cancer.
Okay.
If it's the one I'm thinking of.
I don't know. This is the first time I've heard of her stuff. But the funny thing is that Marie said that she kind of was ranting about it, and somebody said to her, "But it's only a book." And she said, "Yeah, but the average person gets their information." And it's really a shame because in this instance, Jodie Picoult, who has a huge audience and apparently a lot of women read her books.
Absolutely. She's because she's probably one of those people who, I mean, I don't know if she's ever been an Oprah Winfrey book club type book, but she's the sort of author who you'd find on that kind of list, which would really be very heavily read by women who, would perhaps be influenced by that. Yes, women who have children. Fancy that.
Because men. What about men who have children? Yeah, so in that sense, and it's really disappointing that she didn't bother to take a responsible position, particularly with respect to something this important.
I mean, the thing is, I don't know whether I would say that she didn't bother to take a responsible position. I wonder whether she knew what the responsible position was, because, I mean, we don't know what her position is on the issue, and we don't know where she got her information on. So, I would be reluctant to think that anyone would think the responsible position on vaccines would be to be, erring on the side of the anti-vaxxers' views, but we don't know what her thinking was when she wrote it. But nevertheless, the consequences are that her readers would.
Well, this is true. I mean, it plants a seed, and in fact, there was a couple of responses today which I found through Twitter. And they were blog posts from adults who have suffered from ASD, and they expressed the fact that they love her work. And Marie says the same thing. She says it's a great read, but they were very concerned about the way that she had represented autism and ASD in this book. So I expect that she might get a bit of a backlash for this, possibly. So,
It'd be interesting to know. It'd be interesting to know whether she has actually been approached about it and whether she's commented on it at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I received this email on Good Friday from Marie, which was April the 4th, wasn't it? So a little while ago, but it was only today that it started to appear on Twitter, so maybe people are just starting to get to page 498, which Marie's cited here. 400. Well, no, she's given me the specific sections of the book, so if you have a copy of the paperback, please go to page 46 to 47.
And what was the name of the book once more?
It's called House Rules.
House Rules.
By Jodie Picoult. Page 235 and page 498.
There you are.
And then tear them from your book and eat them.
Well, you and I spotted that book when we were having... we went for an exercise walk, actually.
Yes.
And we walked to the airport.
Yes.
And what did we do there?
Nommed.
We nommed. We did.
You nommed an A380.
No, we walked all the way to the airport, which was a long walk, and what do we do here? Oh, let's go and eat.
Well, we went shopping. We went to the duty-free shops, and we found a copy of House Rules, but I couldn't remember what page number to look at. And then we ate sushi.
You ended up walking 17 kilometres, and I walked 20 kilometres.
Yeah, that was mental.
But it was worth it to go to the airport.
Yes.
It was great. And we both thought, here we are at the airport when we're not getting on a plane.
I quite like the airport.
It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
Now, Rachie, let's... something that you were chatting to me about, actually, on our long walk to the airport, which I found really interesting. You've got a very successful blog, of course, The Skeptic's Book of Poo-Poo, which is read by thousands of people. I'm really pleased how popular your blog is. But you've had an interesting series of posts on there recently, and I'd really love you to tell our listeners about that.
Yeah, well, as I said last week in Dr. Rachie Reports, I blogged about the Australian Vaccination Network getting knocked back from paid advertising in a Babies and Mothers publication.
Sydney's Child, Melbourne's
Child, Melbourne's Child, Brisbane's Child.
Yep.
That's correct. And Meryl very kindly copied and pasted my entire blog into her e-newsletter, including my URL. So, Streisand effect, everyone. Yeah, so I had a huge increase in hits to my blog. And, of course, some of them were people that weren't very impressed with my blog.
No, surely not.
And most of them were drive-by people, which means they came by, they said, "You're awful," and just kept going.
Is that the term, is it?
Drive-by, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, drive-by posting. Come past, you say, "This blog is awful," and then...
That reminds me of the people when you're standing on a street corner and you get some hoon who drives past and yells something at you. And I love the fact that when they do, it's always completely unintelligible because you hear them just going, "What?"
That's what this is like. It's like, your blog is awful. Stop being so scientific. Yeah, so I had one of these people drop by.
They should call them Doppler trolls.
And she actually said, "This blog, this is the most horrible site I've ever seen." A couple of other things as well. But in fact, she came back.
Oh,
I say she, but I don't know because it was an anonymous poster. And then a discussion ensued where this person eventually, in fact, she put, I'll just say she for the sake of clarity.
We don't know, but yeah, okay.
She came
really
in.
left with it or he, and really.
I'm just going to use she. She dropped by. She said, "This is a horrible site." She went away. A day later, she came back and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That was really mean." And then just began to sort of engage in discussion with a few people on the blog about her concerns about vaccines and sort of stuff. And then dropped a few sort of anti-vaxxer bombs here and there that...
Anti-vaxxer bombs?
You know, things like I've heard that vaccines are made with beef embryos and monkeys' livers and live chicken blood.
What was the term you used before? Concern troll?
Yeah, so Sean the Bloggernaut suggested to me that we might have on our hands what's known as a concern troll. Do you know what that is, Jo?
I know purely because I think I've come across one who referred to me on it was on the Skeptic Zone comments section and on your blog as well. It was the same person. I assume this would be a person who comes in feigning great concern over something.
So, no, you're absolutely right, Jo. So, concern trolling is a form of internet trolling in which someone enters a discussion and they claim to be concerned, but then actually they're really only there to sort of shift the focus of the discussion away from the main problems, and they're sort of to derail it.
Or to tie you up with irrelevancies, huh? Sort of?
Not so much that, more so to derail it, but that can become it too, is to tie you up with irrelevancies. But the way that you spot a concern troll is usually they'll be using a sock puppet, which means a false name and a false account. It's usually anonymous, so in this case we had an anonymous person. Their name didn't link to anywhere. It was a Gmail address, so it could be established 5 minutes ago. And usually they have been involved in trying to sort of derail political campaigns, where they'll come on and say, whilst I agree with the core of this political campaign, this politician is of concern because blah. So then everyone runs over there to the blah and forgets about...
Changes the focus.
Yeah, so initially with this person, some people suggested it was Meryl Dorry, and they asked them openly if they were Meryl Dorry, and they said no. But yeah, she, for sake of clarity, before she left, she was there for about 3 or 4 days. Then yesterday she left in a stream of abuse, and that was including things that I was a liar, I was irresponsible for not knowing what vaccines were about, and this was because she said vaccines are made with, as I mentioned, live chicken blood, monkey livers, chicken eggs, which they are, and I said they are.
Live chicken blood as opposed to dead chicken blood.
Well, exactly. But the funniest one was beef embryos. Now, at first I thought, okay, so there's cows made for beef and for milk, right? So not the ones that have milk. That's not the kind of cow. But then someone suggested to me, well, no, beef really is like a steak, right?
Yeah.
So
it's something you cook on the barbecue.
So now we're talking about steaks that are breeding to make embryos. So this was just so illogical. And I mean, I work with... I tried to explain to this person that, I think they said fetuses or something, human fetuses. And I said, well, sometimes cells are taken from human fetuses and put into dishes and cultured and for years and years immortalised, which means they never die, and they're used in research. Now, this is what's happened with most cell lines in culture, and I work with ones commonly which are known as MRC5s. Now, these are originally derived from human lung. They're fibroblasts that grow in your lungs. So by the logic of this concern troll, that means I use human lungs in my research. Well, no, I don't.
No, not at all.
And it's the same as, Henrietta Lacks, the book that's just been published by Rebecca Skloot called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Well, lots of people use her cells. They're called HeLa cells. It doesn't mean we've got Henrietta Laxes lined up in the lab and we put them in a dish, That's how illogical.
I mean, that's one of their favourite little tricks is to, much like how we love to see how we can throw as many sciencey words in a box and string them together to form some new woo therapy. We love to throw as many scary-sounding chemicals and scary-sounding words in a box and pull them all out and tell people that they're ingredients in every vaccine and everything that's being injected into them. So, formaldehyde's one of their favourite ones. But
Monkey.
Fetus. You say fetus enough times and everyone's going to go, oh no, run away.
The other one I think was placenta. But in the end, what this person had done was gone through... The CDC publishes a list of chemicals and components used in the manufacture and in the culture of vaccines. And what they'd done was pick and choose scary-sounding words, which actually, when they presented them to me, was just laughable because it was bovine serum albumin, calf serum, bovine protein. What I've just said are the same things. That's three things are the same. And then human serum. Now, okay, we've got bovine, which is cow serum, and then human serum. That's used in cell culture. When you're culturing the cells to then grow the vaccine, and then the vaccine is removed and purified. And so I explained this in words of one syllable to this person. And then yesterday they came back and said, you're a liar. And we had a little bit of a discussion amongst the 3 or 4 of us that had been responding to their posts. And then, lo and behold, this afternoon they came back and apologised and retracted everything that they'd said. And in particular apologised to me specifically and said, I accept all the criticisms, I was wrong, I'm sorry.
Wow.
What?
And so we're now up to comment 142 on this post. So I'm now trying to figure out if we have a concerned troll or just a troll or
someone who genuinely was misguided and thought they knew everything but in fact really just...
I don't know. And on top of that, she said this afternoon, I had a bad day when I got home and I was really frustrated that you guys didn't respond to my complaints the way I wanted you to, so I sort of lashed out and I shouldn't have and I apologise and blah blah blah.
Well, there you go.
How unusual.
But I just on that note, I wanted to just bring up what's been proposed as the Bloggers Code of Conduct.
No?
Well, this was proposed by Tim O'Reilly. Now, he was first reported on the BBC News some years ago, and he proposed 7 ideas for codes of conduct, and that is that you should take responsibility, not just for your own words, but for the comments you allow on your blog.
Yeah.
He says, consider eliminating anonymous comments. It depends on the discussion, I suppose.
It depends on the comment.
Depend on the discussion and on the comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Label your tolerance level for abusive comments. So does that mean...
I suppose maybe what he's saying is sort of setting a bar under which, for example, calling someone an idiot might be considered acceptable, but, using expletives and really tearing someone to shreds personally might be...
Yeah.
Defamatories.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I had libel potentially committed against me last night by them saying you are a liar.
Yeah.
So, ignore the trolls. If you know someone who is behaving badly, tell them so. And importantly and finally, don't say anything online that you wouldn't say in person. Now, I think that's really a nice thing to say, and there's a genuine sentiment in that, but that's just nonsense.
If that happened,
The internet would just...
it would just disappear. No one would ever say anything.
No, I mean, that's the thing about the internet, isn't it? That people feel that they are anonymous in a way, so they can say whatever the hell they like, and they do.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you're in chat rooms. I certainly remember when Stefan and I originally got onto the internet in 1995. I was working with Stefan at the time, and we joined something which was amazing called an IRC room. And we were just going, what is this? We're talking to somebody here and we're talking to somebody there. Freaked us out. But it occurred to me at the time, the people were coming on calling themselves Kimber or Joe 62. Anybody, any age. So it was all like that. Now, Rachie, you and I had a fun evening yesterday. We went to the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the television and radio people, government run, here in Sydney, and we saw our good friend Dr. Carl Kruszelnicki and Adam Spencer recording a new series of their show Sleek Geeks.
We did,
and their topic was the end of the world.
Can I be very jealous? I'm very jealous.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, actually, it was really fun. It was really fun. But I have to tell you, and I looked at you several times during the filming, I felt like I was watching a Phil Plait lecture for quite a large part of it.
I think I even mentioned that to you at one stage.
Yeah.
I whispered in your ear, this is like Phil Plait's
Someone's been
book.
reading Death from the Skies.
Someone's been reading Death from the Skies. So they did asteroid impact and supernova and all that sort of stuff. But it was a good show. It was good fun.
It was really good. I mean, that wasn't all of it. They talked about nuclear apocalypse as a potential. Plagues, yep. And
we won't give too much of the show away, but Carl told us that Sleek Geeks, the new series, will be on air sometime in the next few months. They don't know when exactly. But if the show we went to see is any indication, I think it'll be a good fun series.
No, it was great. And anyone who's heard Dr. Carl, and those of our listeners in the UK... He also does BBC radio.
Yeah. And he, of course, will be a speaker at TAM Australia.
He will be.
He will be. Absolutely.
There's actually been some really good science TV on in the last few weeks, and I have to just mention it purely. I think it might be coming to an end now, but for those people who can tolerate the gory on SBS, and we're not talking about embarrassing illnesses here, Dr. Rachie.
That's your favourite show.
It is my favourite show.
No, I do know what you're talking about.
But on SBS...
I did on the weekend later. Go on.
Well, I don't know if I really want to know, Richard. SBS for the last few weeks has had two really, really interesting shows, one of which is about the history of surgery, and the other one is actually a fantastic show from, I think it's from Channel 4 in the UK, which is a live surgery.
Live surgery,
And it's absolutely fabulous because they've done a hiatus hernia repair, they've done brain surgery, and they have the surgeons mic'd up, and they've got the BBC, the Channel 4 reporter and a whole panel of doctors and an audience all watching, and people can ask questions. And I think this is fabulous because I think it's the sort of thing which really can demystify a lot of what goes on in medicine to people out there who really are clueless about their bodies and about how things work.
It reminds me of an episode of The Goodies where they were doing live surgery in a bull ring. So the surgeon was standing there like the matador, and the patient was wheeled across now, sticking in the needles, and off they'd go.
It's bizarre.
Because that's what it's really like, isn't it, Joe?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. I think I would quite like to participate in surgery like that. That would be fun. You'd have your nurses running across.
That reminds me too, I thoroughly enjoyed the last episode of Mythbusters, which was shown here in Australia. I don't know if you saw it, Joe.
Oh, was this the other night with the diving?
The diving.
Oh, that was brilliant.
I was telling Rachael about it. If our listeners haven't seen it, I won't give too much away, but there's a myth that the old-fashioned deep-sea divers with their heavy metal helmets and their pressurised suit, if they lost pressure under the ocean, what would happen? And it was just hilarious.
Well, I think we can say what the myth is without giving too much away.
The myth is that the body would be crushed.
Basically, the whole body would be sucked up into the helmet. So they devised some really fabulous ways to test this. And if you can get to see it, I highly recommend it.
Jamie and Adam and the gang, congratulations on that episode. It was
brilliant.
Bloody good. It was a great episode. Well, look, let me also mention while we're talking about TV, you lucky viewers in Australia in the past week, it's over now, of course, at 2 o'clock every day this week, the Channel 7 have been repeating The One, starring yours truly.
High quality drama.
And I know they've been repeating it because people were stopping me in the street saying, You're that guy, Mr. Skeptic. Tell me this, Mr. Skeptic.
Yeah, they haven't.
They haven't, no, they haven't.
But
they
people on
probably
Twitter
will.
have been mentioning it, actually.
Yeah.
It's been appearing on
In fact, so much so that I'm starting to wonder who all these skeptics are who are sitting around at home watching daytime TV.
I know quite a few skeptics who sit at home and Twitter about watching TV. Not mentioning any names, Dread Pirate Mick.
No. Actually, I think I'm also just as guilty.
Actually, we're recording this on a Wednesday. I might watch the next 2 episodes to see if they actually get it right. No, it's all right.
No, don't put yourself through it.
I've seen it before. And you too. You were there.
Oh, yeah, I've blocked it out.
You blocked it out.
I've blocked it out.
I know I mention it from time to time, but the team really love to hear, and I know Iran's been getting emails individually about what people do, either listening to The Grain of Salt. So keep those emails coming in. We get a real kick out of knowing what you're doing while listening to The Skeptic Zone. Oh, well, listen, what a fun time we've had. While we've been sitting here, half the restaurant is cleared out, I must say. It's interesting.
No more screaming children.
No more kids running around. But thanks, Joe, very much for coming all the way across town.
I know. It's
a big effort. It is.
It's a trudge.
It is. And thank you, Dr. Rachie, of course. Wonderful to have you, as ever, part of the think tank. And congratulations, sincerely, on the fantastic work you do, especially with the Skeptic's Book of Poo-Poo. I wasn't joking before. It is read by thousands of people. And a lot of people take notice of that, and the comments are flowing in. So, listeners, if you haven't caught up with Dr. Rachie's blog, and if you like listening to Dr. Rachie, you'll love her blog, The Skeptic's Book of Poo-Poo. Or if you just Google The Skeptic's Book, it should.
Oh, with skepticsbook.com, with a C or with a K. But I've also got some big projects up my sleeve at the moment that I should be able to talk about soon, which have sort of come out of the blog, and also the Shorty Awards, which I don't have yet. Where's my shorty?
It hasn't arrived.
No.
I've seen the postal certificate saying that it's on its way, so we know it's in the mail.
It's being tracked on UPS apparently, but you know when you track something on UPS and it goes overseas,
then
there's no signal over the Pacific or whatever ocean it is.
Dear.
No.
Well, when it arrives, we'll have to take the photograph of you holding up the shorty, and we'll certainly blog
bring
that.
it to the think tank.
We'll bring it to the think tank. But just before we go, because we have had so many inquiries about it, Joe, could you just fill us in briefly on the latest TAM Australia news?
Yes, absolutely, Richard. So we've been getting lots of inquiries, and what I can tell people at the moment is that you can read more about what's happening with TAM Australia on the Australian Skeptics website, which is skeptics.com.au. And at the moment, it looks like tickets will be going on sale around about June, with more details to come. So keep posted and check the website, and we'll keep you up to date.
We will.
And we are planning to launch its own website.
Yes.
A specifically dedicated TAM website very, very soon. So at the moment, head to skeptics.com.au, but we'll keep you updated on there when anything changes.
Excellent. Well, we certainly look forward to that. Thank you again, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in or downloading or whatever you do on the internet to the think tank and to the show this week. Thank you, ladies, and cheers.
Cheers. Long cheers. You know what I really enjoyed was getting those emails that people have been sending. Remember we were talking about what people are doing on this podcast?
Yes, they're great.
I love those. They're fabulous. It's just amazing.
Well, wasn't that an interesting episode of the Skeptic Zone? Thanks very much for downloading. And thank you to all those people who continue to help us produce the Skeptic Zone by donating or even subscribing. Details at our website. Until next week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
The Skeptic Zone.